this meeting of the Carson City Historic Resources Commission on Thursday, January 14th, 2021 at the Bob Boldrick Community Center or Theater to order. We have a roll call, please, Tamara.
Chair Drews.
Here.
Vice Chair Darney.
Here.
Commissioner Block. Commissioner Hayes.
Here.
Commissioner Schmidt. Commissioner Schmitter.
Here.
Great. Commissioner Spilda.
Here.
Quorum's present.
Thank you. I think we're going to do a site visit to Brewery Arts Center at 449 and 401 West King Street to review one of the items on our agenda first. So with that, we'll adjourn the meet, or we'll recess the meeting here and move to Brewery Arts Center. Any members of the public who wish to participate are welcome to attend that visit. Please wear a mask. Again, the meeting is the remainder of the meeting will be online. So with that, we'll move to Brewery Arts Center. to reconvene this meeting of the Carson City Historic Resources Commission on Thursday, January 14th, 2021. Members of the public are welcome to comment. You can watch the meeting live on channel 191. If you'd like to make a comment, if you go to the Carson City website, carson.org, links to the phone link is posted there, and you're welcome to comment. Should we call the roll? You, please.
Chair Drews,
Here.
Vice Chair Darney,
Here.
Commissioner Block,
Here.
Commissioner Hayes,
Here.
Commissioner Schmitter, Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Spilda. Here. A quorum's present again.
Thank you. Public
Mr.
comment?
Chair, for the benefit of the record, did the clerk get that Commissioner Schmitter is present?
Here.
Public comment. Members of the public are welcome to comment on matters relevant to the Historic Resources Commission. If you'd like to comment after an item is heard, you're welcome to do that as well. Is there any public comment?
We have Rob McFadden on the line, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Do you want to comment now or wait till your item is heard?
I'll comment now.
Okay.
So, Rob McFadden, for the record. I live nearby the Brewery Arts Center complex, and I wanted to call in and thank them for the cleanup that they've started over there, removing storage containers, hand stenciled signs, long-term storage in the parking lot. It's all really been noticed. I really do feel, however, that the performance hall's louvers being covered and the tie-dye mural being painted in the skyline go against preserving historic materials and the preservation of that building's distinguishing character defining elements. So I wanted to make the comment that if the goal is to make sure all are aware that it's not a church any longer and it's a performance hall, I think signage would accomplish that mission better. And that's pretty much all the comments I have.
Thank you, Rob. You're welcome to stay online and listen to the item when it comes up as well and comment as you see fit.
Okay, thanks.
Any other public comment?
I see no more public comment, Mr. Chair.
Hearing none, we'll move to item C, possible action, approval of minutes from September 10th, 2020 and November 12th, 2020. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item D,
Can I
modification
get
of
who
the
seconded?
agenda.
Oh, you.
Hope, is there any
There are no modifications to the agenda. Thank you.
commission members? Hearing none, we'll move to E1, HRC-2020-0038. Hope. I'm sorry, site visit to the Brewery Arts Center. We've already done that. So, I'm sorry. Item F1, HRC 2020-0037 for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding a request for historic tax deferment on property zone residential office, RO, located at 408 West Robinson Street, APN 003-236-01. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a picture of the property up on the screen for the benefit of the commission. The subject property is estimated to have been constructed in 1905. The property is already subject to a tax deferment. The request is due to a change of ownership. The subject property is included in the Carson City Resources Inventory completed in March 1980, the 1988 update of that inventory, and in the September 2011 architectural survey. The property is in good repair and alterations are in conformance with the Secretary of the Interior guidelines and standards and the city's guidelines for the district. Staff does recommend that you make a recommendation of approval to the Board of Supervisors. Property owner, Mr. Mays, I believe, is on the line. He was on the line earlier, but the commission was on their field trip. I'm hoping he was able to get back on the line if you have any questions for him, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Hope. Is there any commission member questions or comments?
It just looks very well kept, and it's a good addition to the historic district.
Any other comments? Is there any public comment?
This is John. Sorry, this is John Mays, the owner, and I just want to say thank you for your help. No comments beyond that.
Thank you, John. It's a great piece of property, and just keep it up. It looks good. Any other commission member comments?
Well,
Is there any public comment? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of HRC 2020-0037 with no exclusions, based on the findings that the request is consistent with the decision, with the design guidelines for the historic district and the Secretary of Interior standards as noted in the staff report.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Next item is F2, HRC-2020-0036 for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding a request to demolish a garage on property zoned residential office, RO, located at 202 South Nevada Street, APN 003-123-02. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a picture of the building up on the screen for the benefit of the commission. The applicant is seeking to demolish the garage on the property. No development is proposed. Municipal Code 1806075 addresses the demolition of buildings in the district, stating that the commission may approve the demolition if it finds either, 1, the cultural resource is a hazard to public health or safety, and repairs and stabilization are not feasible as determined by a professional with demonstrated experience in historic preservation, rehabilitation projects, or 2, the cultural resource does not meet the National Register significance criteria. According to the Westside Historic District National Register nomination, the garage building was constructed around 1920 and is a contributing building. The house that was on the site is gone. In March 1998, HARC, which was a predecessor to the HRC, so it was the Historic Architectural Review Commission, I believe, approved the demolition, finding that the plans were in general conformance with the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines for rehabilitation and the Carson City Historic District guidelines and the HARC policies, subject to certain conditions. Condition number 3 in 1998 stated that the use for which the permit is approved must commence within 12 months or the request would become null and void. The building was not demolished within 12 months, therefore the approval from 1998 is null and void. Because the building has not been secured, it has become an attractive nuisance. Bryce Edgar, a licensed general contractor with over 35 years of experience, has provided an opinion on the structure, and that's included in the staff report. Given the professional opinion of Mr. Edgar and HARC's 1998 approval, staff finds the building can be demolished based on meeting criteria number 1. The applicant, Gregory Dam, is on the line, I believe, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Hope. Is there any commission member questions or comments?
I would just like to say that since our 1998 decision, this little building was added to the historic district as a contributing element. It represents one of the small secondary buildings, outbuildings, that are not don't get the attention that the bigger houses get that are usually the subject of architectural inventories. So it would be, I think it would be sad to lose this little building because it does represent a type of architecture within the district that we don't see very much of. And since there's no real reason to tear it down, there's nothing being presented to replace it, it doesn't seem like the value, it seems like its value is higher than the request for demolition, so.
Are there any other commission member questions or comments?
I have one. I read the contractor's report, but is anybody, or has the owner contacted the city about relocating it to a site where it could be actually just left in its current state, you know, at a Mills Park or another piece that we have here in the city that we could maintain this? I agree that, you know, we don't give the attention to the little guy, but it's, to me, I've looked at that building quite a bit. I don't want to impede the owner with what their plans are, but, and I just wonder if it couldn't be relocated. It's a small building. It should be very easy to do.
Mr. Chairman, this is Gregory Dam. May I be heard?
Sure.
Thank you. I believe I read in some of the information that Hope presented to me that there'd been, and this was at the time of the last application for demolition, there'd been an inquiry made to the, I think the Railroad Museum, to see if they were interested in the building, and apparently they were not. And so it, and I'm not sure what exactly happened and why demolition didn't commence, but from the records I received, I think the notice that was mailed to us approving the demolition was about 2 years after the commission's approval, so it would have expired before we received it. But I'm a lifetime Nevada resident, was born and raised in northern Nevada, and I have a great appreciation for older buildings. My grandfather was actually in the Nevada legislature. He was the justice of the peace in Washoe County, and believe me, if anybody had any greater interest in Nevada history, I'd be surprised if they had a greater appreciation than I do. But this particular building and structure is very dilapidated. I was involved when I was a young kid with the removal of the home on that property, probably close to 60 years ago now, and I've been involved in trying to maintain the property ever since then. And that shed, if somebody wanted it, I'd certainly let them have it. But I don't know of anybody that would want it, and it is simply, in my opinion, not repairable at this point.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
Mr. Dam, you currently do not have any plans for the property. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct.
You know, would there be a possibility, and I don't know how this would work, that we could have 60 days to see if we could find a place to put this building, to talk to some of the people at the city, maybe go back to the Railroad Museum. They might be taxed and they don't have the ability to move it, but I'd like to see if there's not a way that we could, you know, maybe salvage this building, dismantle it, and and reconstruct it in a different location.
I wouldn't have any objection to that. If someone wants to take on that task and do some checking, that would be fine with me.
Mr. Dan, I have a question. Is the contractor that you had look at this, does he have demonstrated experience in historic preservation and rehabilitation projects?
It's my understanding that he does, yes.
The reason I ask is because the building's really not being used. To stabilize it wouldn't take a whole bunch. I'm not sure if you want it demolished because it's a safety issue or because it's beyond repair. And there's certainly ways to mitigate that, leave it in place. It's been there. And I was on the board in 1998 when we approved the demolition. A lot's changed since then, including it being listed as a contributing element to the historic district. If the building is moved or removed, we're going to have to go back to the keeper of the National Register and take that off our list of properties. As we do that, we start risking losing the designation for the district. So it's kind of incumbent that someone with real preservation experience look at these buildings that have the potential to be demolished and make sure that there is no way to alleviate the public safety hazard or to rehabilitate the building. And I'm not sure that we have this with this. I think, you could screw a piece of plywood onto the open door and probably take care of any public safety issue that the building poses. It's really not in use. If you wanted to find a piece of tin to patch the roof, you could do that, or you could just leave it in the state that it's in. That's just what I'm seeing.
No,
Go ahead.
sir, I don't know if you've taken the time for a site visit, but I think if you actually took a look at the building and you took a look at the inside of it, you'd come to a much different conclusion. First off, the building's not built on any kind of foundation. It's just built on the bare ground. And the wood is rotted inside. It has no, in my opinion, no structural integrity. There's no real way to keep it secure. There was a door there that had a lock on it, and obviously it wasn't sufficient to keep people out. And I can tell you there's no appetite or incentive for myself to put any money into that building whatsoever. I'm certainly happy to donate it to somebody, but it's really of no value, in my opinion, either as a historic item or as any kind of a functioning structure. But as I mentioned, if somebody else would like to remove it to another location, I would have no objection.
This is Commissioner Smith again. I don't want to prevent Mr. Dan from doing anything with his property. And that's why I asked the question if there's, some type of a plan for the property right now. I would like to have the 60 days to maybe talk to Mr. Dan, go over there and look and see if we can't find a way that we can move this. And if we're unable to do that, the same that we did with Adele's, at the end of that 60 days, he can take it down. And I wouldn't expect him to put any cost into this endeavor to relocate the building if at all possible.
Well, Don, one of the issues I see is that under the municipal code, we're asking that we have some more data than just one paragraph from a contractor. We don't have I mean, there's nothing in this packet that tells me the contractor who looked at this has any experience in historic preservation and rehabilitation. There's statements, the metal roof is thin. Mr. Dan just said the foundation's missing and rotting. We have nothing in our packet.
It's not missing.
Excuse me. We have nothing in our packet that substantiates that. If we have a full document, if you look at Preservation Brief 31, it talks about mothballing. And one of the first things you do is prepare a condition assessment. We need to know what condition that's in. We can't just have a paragraph that says, hey, it's fallen down. So I'd like to see a little more background on this. I like the idea of let's take some time and see if we can do something else with it. And I'd like a little more background before we consider demolition.
Mike, and I think I'd like to kind of clarify where I'm going with this. I agree with everything you said. I would like to be able to meet with Mr. Dam. Mr. Jarney and I have a friend who happens to be a structural engineer to take him over there. I happen to have built 2 structures that are on the National Historic Record, so I do have some expertise there that I can share with Mr. Dam. And then we postponed this, we put it on the agenda for next month, and I think we can come back with a little bit better idea. But if there's a possibility to save this building, I'd like to try to do that and give you the information or give this board the information that would either justify relocating or taking it down.
That's a great idea, Don, a great offer. One of the issues I have, and it doesn't really affect this, that's not our responsibility. And I understand, I know, you guys will volunteer your time and take care of it. We have a lot of applications that come to us, and we end up doing all the legwork and all the groundwork. And I feel like when an applicant comes to us with something, we need to do it. In the old days, we used to sit down and draw up plans for applicants. We don't do that anymore. And when we get an application for something like demolition or reconstruction, and we have to do all the work, that's not right. We need a packet. I like your idea.
And again, I agree with you.
In principle,
Mike.
I have a problem.
I just like to take this on as a little bit of a personal challenge and see if I can't do something. It's like I said about Adele's. I sat there and I watched that building get taken down because nobody would step up. And it's not our place to step up, I agree. But this is a little building that has significance, and to postpone this for 30 days, and I'll get a hold of Mr. Dam, and I will help him create the information that you want. I'm taking this on as not a member of this board, but as somebody from the public. So I'm requesting the 30 days.
Mr. Chair,
60 days.
Yes, thank you very much for that.
I think Commissioner Smith just got to where I was going to express a concern, and I think the chair kind of articulated it. If we go back to what the municipal code says, this commission needs to make a finding. What I'm hearing is that there's not sufficient information in the record for you to make that finding. If a member of this commission decides to be the applicant, and that's happened from time to time, you recuse yourself, you step down, you don't participate. So if members of the commission decide to be the ones who are going to bring forward the evidence so that the commission can make the finding, you then cannot be the person who makes that finding. Mr. Dam probably first approached me about this, I'm going to guess at least 4 months ago. This has not been easy to get to this point. Having said that, I appreciate that there's insufficient information. I appreciate that there are different options there. For example, do we have a demolition by neglect situation here? In which case, perhaps the building needs to be secured immediately so that there's no further damage due to the elements. Secondly, if we need more evidence to be able to make finding number 1, if Commissioner Smith is becoming the applicant, that's between him and Mr. Dam. But if you're the applicant, you cannot make the findings. And what I'm hearing from the couple commissioners who have spoken is that we can't make the findings. I would also suggest that if there's interest in exploring relocating this building, that exploration be pursued by the property owner. The staff cannot pursue that. We don't have capacity. Thank you.
Mike, can I say something? I tend to agree with Don for the most part. I understand what Mike's saying about the loss of a resource in the neighborhood. And I do believe that this is a fine example of demolition by neglect. We have a dozen or so of these throughout the neighborhood, and we've been approached several times on some of them to demolish them. And each time that I'm aware of, we've turned them down because the argument really was because of it being infeasible. However, I'm seeing here that suddenly I see being feasible as part of the line item for qualifying it for demolition. So I see a conflict here between this building, which of the other ones in town, I think this is the only one that's on the register. But yet we didn't allow the demolition of most of the other ones that have ever come up to this board.
I think we probably need to revisit some of those other buildings, Rob, because since we have the National Register listing, we've got much more thorough analysis of what's contributing and what's not in town. But
One in particular,
you're right.
One in particular is the little shed with Gigi Valente that is going to fall down next wind, but we never let her tear that down for some reason. So I have a conflict of if we approve this, do we not open the floodgates for everybody in town to demolish all their property?
I would make a comment. I too have a shed like this, and it is on the National Register now. It's contributing. The one behind Abraham Curry's house is contributing. It's interesting that they don't have a foundation, but they're just 2x4s on the ground. And in my instance, I did some work on the inside of my shed, and there's very little rot. It's absolutely amazing. When I mowed this property, Peter Smith hired me back in 2003 or 4. The thing hasn't changed that much, except the door was down a few years ago. I called Peter. I think he knew the owner. And my concern, I appreciate Don's efforts. I think that's great if we could find something, because after March, that roof's going to peel off like a tin can. I mean, it's really, in the last couple of years, gotten bad. If there's some way to relocate it or something, but, the property owner could just leave it alone, and within a few years, it could blow down. And when you reference Gigi Valente's little garage thing, that thing's been ready to fall over for the last 30 years. If they could put a piece of plywood over the door to keep it secure for their liability, and Don works on, see if he can do some magic, I think that would be a great win for us.
Even the city's projects out on the ranch and stuff, this relocating would be much better solution than just letting them demo it. I don't know if there's any materials we're saving. Maybe the corrugation could be used elsewhere, but this is one of those old quandaries. It's a lose-lose in my mind.
I have a question for Hope. Hope, could a simple motion be to postpone action on this to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the HRC, and that the application must be updated to contain more specific information?
Yes, and I would just suggest it be a little more specific at the end to say that the commission finds that the application is not responsive to Municipal Code 1806075, and the continuation is to provide the applicant with the opportunity to provide the evidence the commission needs to make one of the two findings.
Thank you very much, Hope. I'd like to move forward in that direction. I'm just one member here, but it gives us some time, and I can work with Mr. Dam, and he would still remain the applicant, Hope.
I have a question for you, Hope. Being that the shed is 10 feet by 19, it's under 200 square feet, would they need any kind of permit to move it or building permit to relocate it?
I think if we got to what you're suggesting is it's below the threshold for a building permit. So that's fine. In terms of a permit to I suspect they would dismantle it and reassemble it on a different location. We would have to start thinking about large loads, things like that, but I think we could work through that.
And, well, at one point, I was considering moving my shed up in the property for 20 feet, and there's shed movers that move they can move that whole structure, because it's not anchored to any kind of foundation or anything, it's just sitting there, and by some miracle or something, or maybe just gravity, it's been sitting there for 100 years.
It can be moved. I'm going to digress just for a minute. Does anybody remember the Ram's Head Bar on Carson Street? It sat where the Hardman House is now, hotel. Where is the Ram's Head Bar today?
Well, that was Dick's Bar, but it's down in
No, it
Genoa,
is
isn't
the Genoa Country Store. They took it right down 395. This can be moved too.
Yeah, I've moved much bigger buildings than this. Is there any other commission member questions or comments? Are there any public comments? Is someone prepared to make a motion?
I would like to make the motion that Hope made, because I can never remember what she said.
I believe what the motion was is it's a motion to continue this item to the regularly scheduled March HRC meeting, finding that the application before the commission is not responsive to CCMC 1806075, and giving the applicant the opportunity to supplement the application to be responsive.
That's what I meant to say right there. That's my motion.
Second.
Did you get that, Tamara? We have a motion and a second. Any questions? Is that, well, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission, and Hope for considering this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Dam, and we'll hopefully we can get it worked out.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Next item is F3, HRC-2020-0038 for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding a request for exterior work to the buildings and grounds at the Brewery Arts Center on property zoned Public Regional PR and Historic District HD, located at 449 and 501 West King Street, APN 003-207-05, 06, and 07. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is proposing, as the chair said, essentially 5 things: to remove the cross from the top of the steeple, to remove the louvers that are on the steeple, to remove the chimneys in the rear of the performance hall, to replace the lighting on the campus, and to re-roof the brewery building, including moving skylights from the annex area. The application includes a request for signage and for replacement of windows. Staff did find that the application was not at a point where it could be supported and that more information was necessary. The applicants agreed, and so those 2 items will be handled as separate meeting when the applicant supplemented the application. As you can see on the screen, the Brewery Arts campus is comprised of 3 parcels: 501 West King Street, which is the former St. Teresa's Church. Second, the abandoned section of Minnesota Street. And third, 449 West King Street, which is the former brewery building. The church, and thank you to Jed Block for these photographs. They really do a good job illustrating kind of the evolution of this church. The church was constructed in 1870. The building was originally a Gothic revival in style, a 1-story wood frame with a tall tower with a steeple. And it's interesting to look at it when it still has the clapboard and look at the steeple versus the steeple we viewed when we were on the site earlier today. That steeple is intact. The building has been significantly altered over time. The fenestration of the church also has stayed somewhat intact, with the window design having a pointed arch. The entire structure was shiplap, but has been covered with brick, and additions have been added to the front and both sides. This picture I'm showing is in your packet as well. The former brewery building is located at was constructed around 1860. I'm not going to discuss this building as much in depth because the proposal isn't as specific to this building. When we consider removal of the cross and the louvers, we have to look at the guidelines, section 15.20, which gives us guidelines for trim. What the guidelines tell us is that original trim elements should be retained and repaired when at all possible. Staff does consider the louvers on the steeple to be an original trim element. Per the guidelines, this element should be retained as a visual element, although staff does not find that the element needs to be functional. The HRC, though, should consider the request in the context that the building has been significantly altered. Staff does not consider the cross to be trim. When you look at the oldest picture that's up on the screen and you look at that cross, that is not the cross that's on the church today. Section 5.14 gives guidelines on roofs. What the guidelines tell us is that original roofing material and features are to be retained and repaired if at all possible. On the church, the 2 chimneys that were located on the southern addition have been removed without review and approval by the HRC. Since the chimneys were not a part of the original building, staff finds that their removal is not inconsistent with the guidelines. The applicant is also proposing to re-roof the brewery building, including the 1970s addition. The skylights proposed to be removed are on a portion of the roof that's considered the annex. As the skylights were not part of the original building, staff finds that their removal is not inconsistent with the guidelines. The re-roof will not modify the shape of the roof. In terms of lighting, I have a picture of the light. There we go. 5.22 of the guidelines advise us that the addition of lighting fixtures and illumination patterns to historic properties shall be undertaken with sensitivity to the property and its neighbors. Original lighting fixtures and illumination patterns shall be retained when at all possible. The applicant is proposing to replace the existing, which are not original lights, with dark sky compatible lighting. Given the selection of the feature, staff finds that the request is sensitive to the property and the neighbors, thus consistent with the guidelines. Guidelines for new construction. Go back to the church. Guidelines for new construction advise that the design of new construction needs to be compatible and respectful of the historic building stock that surrounds it, so that visual conflict and confusion can be avoided. You heard under public comment, comments that some containers that were on site and some other storage equipment, if you will, that's been on site has been removed. The site was a bit cluttered until very recently. There were 2 dumpsters on site. There's now 1 dumpster. The applicant is cleaning up the property and is proposing to install a trash enclosure. So that's why I've looked at the guidelines for new construction. The applicant is proposing to use the city's specification for the trash enclosure, which would utilize 6-foot masonry block walls and a gate. Staff finds in looking at the surrounding building stock, we need to look at not just the subject property, but the properties across the street as well that have been looking at 2 dumpsters sitting on that corner. And staff finds that the installation of the trash enclosure will improve the appearance of the district as a whole. So staff is supportive of the application before you, with the exception that because the louvers are part of the original trim, staff does believe those louvers do need to be present on the building and reestablished, although staff has not taken the position that they need to be functional. Gina Lopez and Michael Winchick are on the phone. They're on the phone, sorry. And I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. Are there commission member questions? I'm thinking maybe we should tackle some of the easy ones first.
Can I make just some general comments?
Is there an easy one?
Yeah, does anybody have any problems with the re-roofing of the Brewery Arts Center? Or the removal of the skylights?
No.
No questions, comments on that? Okay. That was easy. Let's go to the trash enclosure. Any questions or comments regarding that?
I'll toss a couple things out for discussion. The city detail for typical trash enclosure is fairly vague as far as CMU, period. I'd like to see either it painted to match the building or something along those lines. And I also would like to make sure that the gates are screened visually and not something that you could put a trash enclosure around, but if the gates aren't visually screened, it doesn't make much sense to be able to see them through the gate. So those are the two comments I have.
I'm assuming there's a huge cost difference between cinder block and brick, because
Yeah.
it would be nice to match.
That's, like I said, it's
Could we use a
cost
brick
thing.
veneer?
Cost thing is the only difference.
Could we
I
go
would
with
prefer to see a drawing on this
Yeah,
that show us the gates, that show us what it's going to look like. We would do that with anybody else. So I do have a problem with this one.
yeah, I just think those are a couple, that's a treatment that might make it blend even more and be more compatible with the church, so we can request that. Light fixtures.
I have a question. What is the color of the shade? It's not stated in the packet.
Mr. Chair, can you call on the applicant to answer the question regarding the color of the light shade?
Yeah, Mike or Gina, can you respond to that?
I believe it's a bronze finish. That oil rubbed bronze, it's that dark color bronze.
Does that answer your question, Lynn? Any other questions or comments on the fixtures?
I have one. I would request the same thing we're doing for this is similar to what they want. It's easy to bring to us what they want, the color, huh? No, I understand that, but I mean, we don't know if it's bronze, if it's black. I'm just saying it needs to be a little bit more defined in the packet. This is different than the light that I see there. You know, I would like better clarification on the lighting.
Any other questions or comments on lighting?
Don brings up a question. Is it the light fixture that's shown on the screen now, sort of the curved light, or the light fixture that's in the packet on number 4 listed, that's kind of just a flared light fixture?
Mike, do you want to speak to what they're looking at on the screen? Is the light that you emailed to me and they're observing that's different than the light detail that's in the original application? So have you all decided exactly what you're using, or is this something that should be postponed and handled maybe when windows are handled?
We were planning on going with the style that I sent you today, the more rounded style, not the flared one.
I think that, well, as sad as it is to see the 1979 lights go away, the one that we have on the screen is good, but I think that the one in the packet, the one on the screen, black or bronze. I think that that could be something that should be able, that the chairman could approve administratively.
Yeah, I'd also like, I mean, we kind of walk the site, we know where we're putting these. Having something, another submittal that actually shows the location. I want to make sure that when we put these on the Brick Church and the Brick Brewery Arts Center, that we do get conduit through the mortar and not through the bricks and things like that. So maybe just, another set of plans that show us where they're going and how it's going to be accomplished to make sure that we don't harm the fabric of the building would be great. Any other questions or comments on the lights? Have some direction on that. The chimneys. In Hope's presentation, I think she said it wasn't on the original building. I believe those were on historic additions to the buildings. And I'm not sure why they came down before coming to the commission. Could you address that, Mike or Gina?
The reason they came down without permission is, honestly, I didn't know we needed permission, and both of the chimneys were crumbling and were quite dangerous. The one on the eastern side of the building had already degraded to about a quarter of its original size, and when I removed it, the bricks just came off. And then the other one, the taller one, when I got up on it, the whole thing was moving about 2 foot when I grabbed it. And it looked like it was ready to come down at any point. And since we were in the middle of removing the asbestos roof and had everything stripped down, I felt it was in the best interest of the building to remove the chimneys and just roof over them. I didn't realize that they were part of a historic, feature. And so that way we eliminated penetrations through the roof and kept it from crashing down on someone's head or into the building itself. Both of the chimneys are not hooked up to anything. They've been terminated inside the walls a long time ago.
Those were architectural elements, and was it the Ferris Mansion that just had the chimneys rebuilt? Do you remember, Jed?
Yeah, the Ferris House, because I offered Bob Fredlin some bricks.
Yeah,
Those got redone. And Andy
there are
Vance.
plenty of stonemasons around, Mike, who could have taken those chimneys apart, remortared them, and put it back. It's unfortunate that they're gone, and I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how to act on that part of the item. If they're already gone, they're gone. But
Well, is the brick still, did they throw the brick away?
Yes, it's all been thrown away.
yeah, and it's interesting because we had, when they did the mural both on the Brewery Arts Center and on the annex, the Brewery Arts Center came before Hark and asked, one was administrative, I think the other came before us as a commission, to ask if we could do that. In this case, we've got historic fabric being taken down, and the Brewery Arts Center didn't realize it had to come before us. So it's just an issue, and it'll carry over into the steeple as well. But there's no reason for us to be here if property owners are going to do what they want and then come back to us and ask permission to do it. I don't know why we exist. So anyway.
This appears to me to be a case of ask for forgiveness instead of approval. And I'll tell you, I want them put back. I want them put back on the building.
Now,
So my only comment on that is if we have them rebuilt back, then all they are is faux chimneys. Unless you can find matching brick, then I say it might be worth it. But otherwise, it's not an active chimney, so you'd have a cap on it, and it would be a faux chimney. Is that historic?
Rob, I did historic down on 2nd Street. We had 2 chimneys penetrating the roof, and we went to, and we were told they had to stay, and I understood, I wanted them to stay. And we structurally, through structural engineer, came up with a way to support those from underneath. Those chimneys are still there and they add to the building.
Well, I'm not saying you couldn't do it. I just wonder is it worth doing if they're not going to match or?
Oh, I think what we're going to do is
You can match
put that
it, then
on
yeah.
them to make them match.
Absolutely. But if you
You
can't
know,
match
go to
it,
the extra work, make them match. There's all kinds of brick that we can get that, you know, that they can get to put those back. That's going to be my vote.
and then we'll have to decide, is it just the visual box or are we talking about, because, you know, you could just build a wood box and skin it with brick.
No, that's brick. You can do it. I've had to do it myself in the district.
Yeah.
They can do it. And this is a case where we hold people to a standard, and just because somebody took it down, that's not an excuse.
Oh, I'm
And
not
neither
making
should
an
money
excuse.
be an excuse.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just wondering of the value of putting something back for solely the illusion of what was there instead of
Because they
what
shouldn't have
actually was
taken them
there.
down without asking.
Oh, I understand that, but if we can find brick that can match it, I agree, but if it's non-matching brick, I don't want to see that. Okay.
I've got a couple comments. I mean, Mike and Gina, you know it's no secret that I've sit on this board. You guys have known me for years. I asked Mike for the brick after it was done, but, you know, another observation, we've been talking about over the years, the view of the front of the building. In the front of the building, you would have never seen those chimneys. They were pretty far. I've got a couple pictures, I'm sure, that shows the back of them. I really think that chimneys are a character-defining element. That's why I had, on my house, we had to go down 6 or 7 courses to rebuild it where it was safe. Of course, those bricks fall off because that's what the mortar's designed to do. The mortar's designed to go away before the brick does. They weren't very big back there, but I think that's another element that got lost. And I think Don's right, and I think Rob's right, but if the original chimneys are still under the roof, which they probably are, I don't know if you took them down all the way down to the ground, but you would have support to be able to do that. And to put them back on there, a new red brick would look a little bit different, but I think we could find the red brick, but you know, they're gone, it happened. But what do we do about it? And are we setting a precedent for the next person to say, well, it was just a chimney?
Is there any other commission member comments on the chimneys? Yeah, I appreciate your comment about the front facade, Jed. Although this building fronts on 3 streets, 4 streets before Minnesota was abandoned. And I think you need to look at all 4 corners of buildings that take up a whole lot. Just because it's on the back doesn't mean that it's not visible. Let's go to La Crosse.
You know, if the old cross was on the church, that old picture, I think that'd be worth saving. I think that would be great, but it looks like probably before the addition was put on after that 1980 picture in the upper right-hand corner, it's not the same cross. It's nothing ornate. It's nothing original to the building. And being that it's not, you know, church groups do meet there, but it's not officially a church, I would let them have approval for removing the cross.
Any other questions on that?
I personally,
Do we know how to,
this is not from
sorry, go ahead, Don.
This is not from a religious standpoint. I think the cross is a defining character of the building. I think it stays.
Isn't, though, a cross like that more in tune with the signage? I mean, it's a Christian cross, but it could just as easily have been a 5-pointed star or a, you know.
I would have said the same thing.
Yeah, but I see it more of a signage which goes with the tenant as opposed to a contributing factor. Now, if it was the original cross, that'd be a different story, but that's not what we have here.
Michelle?
Yes, thanks. Do we know how it's attached?
Mike, can you answer that?
The cross is clad in metal, and at the very base of it, it appears to be, we flew a drone up there, and it looks like it's two 2x6s put together, and there's looks like 6 inches of wood exposed, and then the rest of it is clad in the metal, as is most of that steeple, for preservation purposes, I assume. I don't know how deep it goes into the building, but the plan was to just remove it at where the wood is showing and put a cap on top of it.
It also looks like the one on the rear has already been removed. Well, the pictures show that there was two. It looks like the one on the rear has already been removed.
Right. That is correct. It was taken off. It was falling off, and so was then removed.
And it was on the addition.
Right.
So I have a question. Did St. Teresa's ask for the cross, or are you just giving it to them? It's kind of unclear here.
Yes. Yes, they did. When they heard that we were going to be removing the roof, or redoing the roof, they asked if they could have the crosses. So we gave them the one that was on the back, and we were going to give them the one off the top of the steeple if approved.
Again, half of the elements have been removed again without consideration. And I guess, are there other commission member comments before I give my 2 cents? I guess the question here is this a significant building because it's one of the three oldest churches downtown, or is it historic because of its architecture and we're letting that sit? It seems to me that if it's important because it's a church, then the cross does become one of the character defining elements as well. I mean, I can see it becoming a secular building. But I mean, that's just my 2 cents. If this is a church and we want to kind of keep that feel, then we need to look at the fenestration, keep the fenestration the way it is, keep the elements as intact as we can, and let it go on as a church that's being used for other purposes. So that's how I feel about that. Any other?
That's an interesting comment. I mean, you have the Presbyterian Church, which is the original one's the oldest church building in Nevada. Then you have the Methodist Episcopal Church. Then you have the Episcopal Church, and then this was the fourth one built. And can't find any information on the Baptist Church that used to sit on the corner of Minnesota and Telegraph Street that exploded in 1969 or 7, somewhere in there. But yeah, it's one of the four. And when, a lot of your comments, I do appreciate that there was the cross in the back, the cross in the front, the 2 chimneys. There's a fair amount of people in this town that would want the cross saved. A lot of ceremonies and everything, weddings and funerals and everything that happened there, people that are still around here. And then there's others that feel, well, we had our time there that was our church, and now it's time to move on. And in talking with Joe McCarthy, when Father Jerry was wanting to sell it to the brewery, or to the city of Carson or the Brewery Arts Center, which the city gave $565,000 towards the roughly $1 million purchase, they were just happy as can be that it was going to be an art center. And they left the bell, they left the crosses, and later on, when John Sheldon was the executive director, they wanted the bell back. And they've got it operating out of the church over off of Lampa, which is pretty amazing. There's a whole lot of things that, at the first blush of this, the cross isn't necessary. Well, yeah, maybe it is. And the chimneys, well, they weren't that important, but yes, they are. And then now we're going on to the louvers next.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just to piggyback for a second on what Commissioner Darnay said. I'll just pose the following question to the commission. If this church was occupied by a congregation that didn't want a cross, what would the answer be?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, from my standpoint, mine would be the same because this isn't about, and I tried to preface, this isn't about religion. We are here tasked with the duty of preserving the history through buildings in this community. So my answer would be, sorry, but that we have the requirement or the direction to preserve the history, and we do that through the two things that Mike was talking about, architecture and historical significance to the community. This was a church. Its history as a church. You know, people may forget that in another 50 or 100 years, but we're trying to preserve these buildings for people to understand, just like that little garage that we were talking about.
Any other comments from the commission on this? Is there any public comment for the items that we've discussed so far? Let's move to louvers. Commission members?
I'll toss out a couple comments here. The first question would be that we had a conversation on the site of the fact that that steeple is no longer vented. So there becomes a question from probably the building department of we have a concealed enclosed space with no vent that could itself cause this to deteriorate further and probably even collect mold. The second would be, of all the things we've talked about, I think the vents on this are hugely significant to the contributing factor of this building architecturally. Now, whether they're operable or not, no. I think that there needs to be something there to show. I mean, if they replaced them with glass and made them windows, I would be in acceptance of that. But I think it's the form with the Gothic arch that is part of the architecture of the building, and that should be maintained somehow. I don't necessarily mean that they have to be an operable vent, but that should be a consideration of what about venting that concealed space?
Other commission member comments?
Yes, this is Michelle. I feel very strongly that there needs to be some airflow up there. And because it's an unconditioned space, I've gone into a lot of towers where there's mold. We've put this marine grade plywood up. I don't know how it's been attached, and that's probably impacted the historic material underneath it. I would be in favor of the louvers just like they were. There's a reason it was designed that way, and it wasn't just to hear the church bells. I mean, it was venting the entire building up through the top. That's my comment. I'd like to see the vents be operable.
I would agree with that. It's like lighthouses. The tower serves a function, and the louvers venting the tower was an important element functionally as architecturally. I think the steeple as the symbol of the church and the architecture it represents is really the most important element that people see when they come down the street and when they see this building. And so to have those elements as original as possible, as true to the original design is really important. And I know that we can't say anything about picking colors for a building, but I don't think this is colors. I think this is a mural that's been painted on the steeple, and I don't really think it's appropriate. So I'm just throwing that out there, but I think the steeple should be characteristic of the time period it was built, the architectural style, and its importance as a symbol. So
I agree with both Michelle and Luann on that. And as far as the mural goes, I was so disappointed. You know, those shouldn't be there. And I tell you how we cover those. Murals or signs. You got to come in here and get an okay. Has nothing to do with color. Those shouldn't be on that building.
So my comments on the louvers, I think the louvers should be restored. I mean, it's wood, you can rebuild all that stuff, and there's nothing there that can't be fixed. But if you're talking about venting, you can also put 1/8-inch wire mesh behind it. That'll keep the birds, bats, bees, everything out of there, and it gets rid of the venting problem. And also, when I was on the board 15 years ago, we had a donor that was willing to donate some money to put fans up there to cool the building down because it gets so hot up there and the energy efficiency. So, the louvers, that's the hard part. I think they need to be rebuilt. That they're basic pieces of wood that a lot of people can make. I think that's really important that architectural detail gets restored. And what I would really like to see is, it looks like an old 1871 building built by Peter Kavanaugh, blah, 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 but, you see all this stuff on the outside, but I think it would be kind of cool if you opened up those front doors and went, wow, this is amazing. Look how cool this art center is on the inside. I think that would be really cool. And, when we're talking about the roofing on the old building, they did a ridge vent in the church, which I think looks better than all the metal vents. And when they redo the original 1864 building's roof, that we talk about a ridge vent in there as well.
Are there any other commission member comments?
I'll try to make a comment. It's hard to hear all you guys, the people who wear hearing aids and all these barriers, but it seems to me, we're giving a lot of thought to this. We need to summarize it, number one, so I know what all the things have been said. But I see the argument to keep the cross and keep the general look of what was there historically, even though it's not the original cross. And I see the argument for restoring the louvers and having that general look, and then dealing with the practicalities of ventilation and so on, and keeping all the critters out, and et cetera. So where do we go with this? I mean, they want to do good work on the brewery. They want to have it solid and dealing with the elements and so on. And we need to help them, I think. But I agree. They've done some things without asking, and that's a problem. And I don't know where our consensus is in terms of keeping the cross or not, and so forth. But I think we can come to a consensus. So let's try.
I'd like to follow that up with one comment that is kind of bothered me ever since I've been on this board. The Brewery Arts, is doing a fine thing for Carson City. But what you just said, that we should help them, they have some financial problems. We would not let anybody from the private sector come in here and use that as an excuse. I myself have said several times, don't come in here and make money your issue. Don't buy the building if money is your issue. So I can't, in good conscience, tell the Brewery Arts, oh, we want to help you financially, and the next person that comes in here says, look, we can't afford to do what Jed's doing to his building. Well, we're sorry. Jed does it. Everybody does it. We can't help you there. You must adhere to our rules and understand why we're making you adhere to those rules. Because we're trying to preserve the history of Carson City.
Gina and Mike, I would direct you guys. The Brewery Arts Center owns two really important historic buildings in Carson City, the brewery and St. Teresa's Church. You need to get a hold of a copy of the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. It talks about how to preserve buildings, how you should treat historic buildings. And while you're at it, look at the Carson City Historic District guidelines, because our guidelines are in tandem with the Secretary's guidelines. The things that have been done already to the church do not meet those standards. And I just lost there we go. They don't meet those standards at all. As we saw today, there's a vent on the Brewery Arts Center, or on the old brewery that has fallen out and missing. That's going to help those bricks deteriorate. There was a lot of money that was put into restoring the masonry on that east side, and we need to stop it. These are important resources in Carson City. This isn't the 19 by 10 foot shed that we heard earlier. These really are important, and it's incumbent upon the people who are managing them. We've instilled this trust to whoever manages that property, and it's important that you guys understand that it has to be managed so that it lasts for generations. So, is there any other commission member questions or comments?
Can I just say that I appreciate the fact that they spent an awful lot of money working on the roof and getting that replaced. I think that's probably a huge, huge expense. I just wish that when it came to the steeple, they would have come to us and talked to us about it, because that's just such a character-defining feature and element of that building. And I really do appreciate the fact that they spent a huge amount of money on the roof itself. But these other, what it may have seemed like a small decision at the time, or a silly afterthought or something like that, are really critical to our interpretation of these buildings. And so, while I think you did a good job on the re-roofing the roof, I think we've lost some design elements that are really, really important. And so I feel bad about that and where we're at right now.
Any other commission member comments? Is there any public comment? Rob, are you still there?
I have no further comment. Rob McFadden.
I'll entertain a motion if anyone has one. I guess to recap, we don't have a problem with the re-roof. We'd like some more information that could be approved administratively regarding the replacement of the fixtures. And we have some issues with the chimney, the louvers, and the steeple. And we'd like some more information on the dumpster screening. Does that summarize it, Hope?
Yes, I feel like on the louvers, I feel like there was a consensus that the louvers should be restored. Did I misunderstand that? So I feel like on the cross, there were a lot, I think a majority of you wanted to retain the cross. It might be worth just doing a show of hands to see if that's the case. On the louvers, my understanding is the request to remove the louvers was denied, and they should be restored. The chimneys, it sounds like a majority of the commission believes the chimneys should be reestablished. The lighting, you are looking for more detail, and that can be handled by the chair in terms of the location and the attachment detail. And you have approved the re-roof. We do have this property coming back before you to look at the windows at the church. So if there's anything that the commission would like to have handled, to continue and bring back with the windows, we can certainly do that. But I think we need a little more guidance on what the commission's looking for in terms of the chimneys, if my summary was correct.
Let's, by a show of hands, who's in favor of removing the cross? Michelle, you can say yes or no.
No, I think it's part of the character-defining feature of the steeple. I think it should stay.
Anyone else?
I just have to comment. I mean, when this first happened and St. Teresa's moved away and this became part of the brewery and there's another St. Teresa's, I thought, oh, well, you just take the cross down and, it's just another building. But you've changed my mind. Obviously, that's not the way to think about it. this is an old historic structure. No, it isn't the original cross. You can see it was a different cross in a very early photo, but still, it's been there a long time. What's there has been there a long time. Been there all the 35 years I've been around here, so.
Luann?
Keep it.
I think probably keep it.
You guys have changed my mind. I think we should keep it.
Rob?
I'll go along with that.
Don?
Keep it.
Okay, we have consensus on the cross.
Just one thing on the re-roof, because you can do it administratively, but none of these roofs had all these wacky, weird metal vents. And you can do a ridge vent now that removes this. If you look at when we were out at the performance hall, there weren't any metal roof vents, galvanized, painted, faded, anything like that. Is that something that could become a requirement when you do an administrative approval for roofs?
I think we're talking about mushroom-type vents as opposed to a single line at the ridge, which has like a standoff feature to the top course of the shingle that allows the roof to vent to the top.
So looking at venting in terms of a character-defining feature and retaining venting design at the time of re-roof, is that what you're suggesting?
The old roof didn't have vents exposed on their field.
The old roofs, they had gaps 1 inch to 2 inches between the boards, and then it was cut cedar that went on there. And without any felt or anything underneath it, the roofs could breathe. And so now when you use felt and you put the OSB on top of it, there's no way to vent it. So you have to put metal vents, whether they're mushroom, whether they're the twirly birds, flat metal things. And now when you go to the top bridge, you cut about 2 inches off each side, and then there's a piece that they put over it that breathes. So a way of venting the roof is through the whole ridge line instead of having little mushroom metal vents put all over the place.
That would be my preferred method. However, the reality is it might not be enough square inches of vent to make it worth the while.
It's something we can look at when we start doing administrative approvals on roofs. I think most roofers now are going with the ridge vent because it is a lot cheaper, and especially when they're switching from skip sheathing to solid sheathing, because it does allow, I think the way they do it gives you better ventilation than if you were putting in roof jacks or roof vents. But
when you look,
that's kind of off the subject. Let's go to louvers. Don, do you want to start on louvers?
Yeah, I'd like to see I would like to see the louvers put back to their original state. There are ways that they can provide the mesh, as Rob had pointed out, behind those louvers, and those on that building were used for dual purpose. One were for the bell, the other was to vent. We're talking about the roof right now. That was a major venting source for buildings of that period and that type of architecture. I would like to see them restored back to an original condition. I think that's a very, very character-defining feature of that steeple.
Rob?
No, I'm fine with that. The only reason I brought that other comment up about whether they're operable or not is because they mentioned there was water damage in there. These things are huge. They're 6-7 feet tall. And trying to keep that west elevation from driving rain has caused some damage on the interior. So I'm kind of concerned about propagating that further.
The only question I have was, when was this building built, Hope?
Yeah,
they've serviced pretty well. They just have to spend some time and bring them back to the condition that prevents that from happening.
Yeah, it seems like the function of a louver is to do just that.
So let me ask you a question. Let me ask you all a question. Because I'm only concerned about that west side, because that's where every building I ever do for anybody always leaks. We have driving rain that pushes water under garage doors. Would you have any issues if they restore all of them, But on the back side of that west elevation, if it becomes an issue, they could put a board across that and close that one off and paint it black.
What if they were to put the board behind the
That's what I
louvers?
meant.
Okay, oh, you said in front.
So
If they
from the
put it
outside,
behind-
no one really
From the outside,
can
it
tell.
looks the way it should, yes.
You can't see through it.
Yeah.
So
that-
it makes,
I'm good with that.
and that's only if necessary. If it comes to the point where it's unnecessary and it doesn't leak and it had worked it all those years and no issues, then I don't have a problem. But if they come to us and say, hey, we need to put something behind that to stop the water from coming in, as long as it's on the inside, I don't have an issue with it. And it's painted black, so it appears to be open.
Well, and the other thing to consider, those louvers did pretty good for 150 years. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Jed, retain or remove?
Retain.
Greg? Retain or remove the louvers? Luann?
Yeah, we should restore the louvers to the original appearance.
Michelle?
Agree. Keep, restore, put back, make operable, let the building breathe.
Chimneys? Michelle? Should we restore them or let it go?
There's one that goes through the building, right? And one is an end wall chimney. Correct? Can we do them separate?
Do you know where the chimneys were originally? Hope, do we have any before shots of?
I don't have any before shots of the chimney now. It was along the Thompson Street front, the facade.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we, they're going to come back with windows. Why don't we put the chimneys on the next agenda? And then we can discuss, maybe we can get, I'm sure we can go to Google Earth and get some street shots before they were taken down to see what they looked like and what state they were in, where they were. So we can do that. So it looks like consensus is we want the cross to remain. We want the louvers restored. We would like we'll approve the re-roof. This says 40-year asphalt shingles. Mike, I believe when we were on site, you said 30-year. Are they 30 or 40?
30. I believe that they were 40-year singles.
Okay. When we bring the other items for administrative, maybe if we could just have the cut sheet on those or something just to confirm. I mean, the only difference is they're a little bit thicker if they're 40s and have a slightly different shadow line. So we'll approve the re-roof with the submittal of cut sheets and things. We'd like more clarification on the fixtures and more clarification on the screening. Okay, any other questions or comments, Rob? Or
I have one. I want to know what we're doing about the murals on that building. To me, they're graffiti on a building. They're not art. If that were a different type of building, if it wasn't historical, they should have come to us about those. Those murals should not be on that building.
We're not agendized to discuss those.
I know, that's why I'm asking the question, if it can be agendized or if they can add to it. I'm not asking for any consensus with anybody. I'm just giving my viewpoint.
We can ask when we get to our discussion items. We can certainly have Hope agendize that for another meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll take a stab at it. I move to approve HRC 2020-0038, the application from the Brewery Arts Center building and facility to re-roof. We find approval of that. The trash enclosure, we want to see additional information, including whether it be painted or brick or CMU, with the gates that are screen the trash dumpsters visually. We want to maintain the existence of the cross at the top of the steeple. We want to have with the light fixtures, we approve the light fixtures that are selected. We just want a clarification administratively on the color. The louvers on the steeple, we want to maintain and have restored and replaced in like with the existing and be functional to all intensive purposes of function. And is there anything else I'm missing?
One thing, if I could just add, when it came to the light fixtures, Mike had requested a drawing that indicates where the lights would be placed.
And yes, on the
for
light
review.
fixtures, in addition to the color clarification, we also need to have maybe a site map or a building map showing locations of their installation.
And I think the attachment detail.
I'm sorry?
The attachment detail, how it would be attached.
Okay, in addition to how the light is attached to the brick through the mortar, with some sort of a sconce or something at the brick, and that it comes through the mortar joint, not through the brick itself.
I'm going to ask for a second.
Can I just add one more thing?
Second.
We're going to defer the removal of the chimneys or dealing with the chimneys until the next meeting.
Deferred to the next scheduled meeting, the removal of the brick chimneys at the rear of the building.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any question?
Can we repeat that motion one last time, how Tamar has it?
Well, I have a question, and that is, the item before us was to approve these items. We've denied two of them. We've denied the removal of the cross and the louvers. I think we need to put that in the motion, and we need to cite our findings, which relate to 5.20.1 in our standards and guidelines, or the 5.2 in Hope's presentation, to say that I think what I'm saying, Rob, is that we've approved 4 of the items. We've continued 1, and we've denied 2. We need to have findings why we've denied those 2 in case it goes to appeal. And I think the findings are right here in the guidelines for exterior trim and details, that they don't meet.
I'm not sure I have to define that in my.
We have to, because if it goes to appeal, we have nothing to stand on. All we have is the minutes of the meeting.
Okay.
And there's
I need to
nothing
have
for
you
the,
give me somebody-
nothing for the supervisors to relate it back to.
Okay. Let me add to my motion on the denial of the removal of the cross and the denial of the covering a removal of the louvers, that this is in keeping with the guidelines of the historic buildings under section 5.20.1, that the original trim elements should be retained and repaired when all possible. Trim that is inconsistent with original building style and design shall not be added. And note standards number 2, 3, 5, and 6.
Could you also add that we believe that those are historically significant elements of the building?
Okay, and that these 2 items that we have denied, we all find that they hold historic significance to the original building.
I have amended motion. Do I have a second on the amended motion?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? We'll see how creative Tamara is. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Our next item is F4 HRC-2020-0214 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding potential nominations for the 2021 Carson City Historic Preservation Awards for outstanding achievements in historic preservation. Oh,
Typically, every January, we schedule this so you can start thinking about ideas for the preservation awards that are given in May. Last year, you'll recall you gave it for the Bliss Mansion and the Brennemans. So this I put on the agenda. You don't need to really make a decision yet. You sometimes will come up with ideas and ask that we pursue some research on it, and then we formally discuss it at the March meeting.
any ideas quickly? We can continue this to March, and I think we usually do it in the May meeting, so we have time to bring it up. Any ideas?
Yes, I have one. David Peterson from the Tourism Commission for all the markers they did for the Blue Line Trail and repurposing all that stone from the prison farm and the medallions from Carson Street. I think that was an awesome job.
I would add to that Nevada State Prison, what's their program? The ones who did the stonework and
Prison Industries.
Prison Industries and Carson City Public Works, because there was a lot of effort put in by Public Works to get those done too. Any other ideas? We can bring them back. If there's more, bring them back and we'll consider them. If you want to just send them to Hope in the meantime, we could do that too, and we could have a fuller list for the next meeting. Any public comment on that item? Public's encouraged to drop an email to Hope if they have other nominations, and we'll consider those. Item F5, HRC 2020-0031 for possible action. Discussion and possible action to approve the Historic Resources Commission annual report for 2020 to be presented to the Board of Supervisors. Hope?
I provided a draft report for your consideration. One thing I have not put in the report, and I'm just flagging it in case you'd like it added, is there's been general discussion among this commission about looking at maintenance issues in the district going forward. I have not mentioned that in the report, but I didn't know if that was something you want to discuss or propose to the Board of Supervisors. So otherwise, the report's before you for your consideration, and the annual report is presented typically by the chair to the Board of Supervisors at their February meeting.
I think the report looks good. Is there any commission member comments on that? Yeah, I think we could probably, let's add some ideas. I know that's one of the questions the board usually asks. And I think that'd be good to add to it for things we're looking at doing this year. Any other questions on that? Any public comment? Hearing none, we'll go to F6, HRC-2020-0213. For possible action, discussion on possible action to elect the Historic Resources Commission Chairman and Vice Chairman for the period February 2021 to January 2022. I guess we can open nominations for chairman.
I have one question first. Mike, this is just we had that pause there for a while, so this is the end of your first term, right? Two consecutive years.
This is the end of my second consecutive.
It is?
I'm pretty sure it is, yeah.
It is.
No, as chairman. No, I think Jed was chair for, no. That was before Hope? Oh. So how long? Which does bring up the city policy regarding 2 consecutive terms as chair. Also, my term on the board expires in February, I believe. I don't know if there's been other applications to the Board of Supervisors, but
Well, I think if we nominate you as chair, they can't deny you in February. I mean, that would be ludicrous.
they can impeach me.
Besides that, it says policy, it doesn't say law.
No, it does say policy, and that's what we've done before. We've decided that we could do it. Anyway, if there are no other questions, I will open nominations for chair.
I nominate Mike Drews for chairman of our committee.
Second.
Are there any additional nominations?
Are we clear that it's okay to do this? We're not supposed to have a pause again and bring you back the next time. So
It's been on the
Mr.
line.
Chair, Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. I believe that the policy is aspirational. It's meant to give all members of the board an opportunity to serve as chair. However, if the board is, if there are no other nominations and the board is comfortable, there's not going to be any kind of, punishment if you decide to elect him as chair again.
Yeah, that was my understanding before.
This date sounds like deja vu. I think we've had this
Are
before.
well,
there
in that
no
case,
other,
nominations are closed.
are there any other nominations? Nominations are closed. All in favor?
Aye.
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 The ayes have it. I guess I can hand the gavel to myself next meeting. I'm opening nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to
I
nominate
would like to
Rob
move on,
Darney.
by the way. I'd like to let somebody else have a chance at this one.
Maybe Don Schmidt.
Have
you know,
all
I'd
the
like to see him
have
step
the
there.
power that comes with the job.
Yeah, no.
How about Michelle?
Great. I'd like to nominate Michelle Schmitter for vice chairman.
Second.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Nominations are closed. All in favor of Michelle for vice chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Way to go, Michelle.
Thank you.
Item G, staff reports. Discussion only. Hope.
Since your last meeting, the chair has approved the movement of an existing sign in the district, so it's been a little quiet since your last meeting. I also, if possible, I'd like to have a meeting in February for one, to talk about property maintenance. You've been asking for that to be agendized, and we had such a big agenda this meeting. We didn't put it on. Also, Brewery Arts does have the windows and now chimneys to come before you. So hopefully you'll be available, and I'll send a reminder out to everybody for a February meeting. And that's all I have right now. Oh, Jed, you may ask about the French doors on, was it Telegraph? We have not seen an application on those yet.
Yeah,
You brought
there's
those
the-
to my attention at the last meeting, and I did refer it to code enforcement.
Don, you wanted a discussion
Yes,
regarding?
please. I would really like to have a discussion placed on the agenda regarding those murals and how they showed up.
I'd like to make a request also this might be a question for our legal team, that because of all the onslaught of our demolition by neglect that we've come across every now and then, we've talked about this several times about things like people putting trash in the right of way and things like that, and whether or not we have any teeth to be able to do anything about this, such as a fine or a tax something or other. I need to find out what can we do. I know that up at Lake Tahoe, TRPA, if you cut a tree down, it's $5,000. Now, how do they enforce that? And is there some legal method by which we could have something in place that would help us be able to circumvent this? Because it's getting to be a serious problem.
If I remember right, we do have a demolition by neglect.
But does it have any teeth? Is there a penalty? Is there a?
I think there were penalties and there were some remedies for it too, in terms of it was pretty similar to non-payment of property taxes and things like that. The city could actually take things over, and so maybe it would be good to have a presentation regarding that. Also, do we need an open meeting law presentation again this year?
They typically do an ethics training and open meeting law. Ben, do you have that on the calendar yet? Or what are your thoughts?
We can do that if the board desires, or excuse me, if the commission desires. It's not strictly necessary, but it's always a good idea. In lieu of that, there's also the video that our office produced regarding open meeting law that is on YouTube. We haven't done one for ethics yet. But I'm more than happy to, put something together if the board would like a presentation.
Yeah, maybe if we do, I think we sat through the video one, was it last year? Whatever pleases the district attorney's office would be fine.
I think in terms of the discussion on property maintenance, we can include a discussion on the provisions in the code on demolition by neglect, because it all kind of goes together with property maintenance.
Okay, any other agenda items? Don?
I want to take the deal about the murals one step further.
Let's
No,
wait till-
no. I'm on what I want on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
That we discuss. And then I would like to know what our options are during the discussion. What can we do? What can we require? I'd like to know what our options are. That was the question, not to discuss it, but to have that placed on the agenda with not only discussion, but what options do we have as a board?
Okay, thank you.
And I have one. Did we ever hear back on the HPF grant for Silver Saddle Ranch?
Yes, we did not qualify for, that did not qualify because it's not, that's not on the National
It
Register,
wasn't listed
was
on
it?
the register, so
Right.
we can't acquire funds. That's, listing the Silver Saddle Ranch is something we could talk about this year as well. We might put that on the annual report. But
Yeah, I think-
evidently, that's what stopped us from getting any funds for that.
And we talked about potential, SHPO suggested that we seek funding for the nomination to the National Register. And I consulted with the Parks Rec and Open Space staff, and they indicated that they couldn't unilaterally kind of green light that. They'd need to go to their commission and the board and so on. So it would take a little bit of time before they could commit that would be something they'd want to pursue.
Yeah, that's something that'll definitely be a joint discussion with Parks and Rec and Community Development. Any other agenda items? Is there any public comment pertaining to the Historic Resources Commission?
I see no final public comment, Mr. Chair.
Hearing no comment, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Adjourned at 7:14. Thank you.